Hello and welcome to the Tavern Chat podcast. I am your host, Eric Tenkar, your bartender in the OSR, your main proprietor at the Tenkar's Tavern blog, and this is another in our series of designers and makers fireside chats. As I've said before, I don't like calling them interviews because the rails are few and we go on our own little adventures when we do these things. Today, we have Elfstar, also known as Claire. I'd like to welcome you to Tavern Chat.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Um, for those that don't know, Elfstar and I have communicated via Discord for like months now, going over some of the projects that you've been working on and tinkering with. So we will get to that after the initial questions. But as I explained to you before the show, and those that have listened prior know, I have the same questions that I ask of everybody. It gives a nice little grounding into the background of my guests. So, tell us about your first RPG experience.
Well, it gets a little hard to remember all the details of your life as you get older.
Trust me.
But the probably the earliest experiences that I remember were definitely with Dungeons and Dragons in that first kind of like the what was it, the reissue of that red box in the early 90s, right before they put out the RC. And that was one of the first things that I ever got. I got it myself. I paid for it myself. And then I I started to learn that most people didn't understand what it was. and it made it very difficult to find other people to play, but I was actually very young. I was still like early years of middle school. But as I got closer to high school, it became more about we went into Rule Cyclopedia at first, and then it became more about playing second edition, and second edition was really kind of like an extension of what we had been doing with some of the first edition stuff too, because I still had friends that were playing first edition
right
at that point. But yeah, I think my earliest experience, like the thing that I'm most fond of was, like, it sounds silly, but I think because I didn't have too many people to play with earlier, that I actually spent a lot of time with those books and those dice and just a paper and pencil and making it up and playing on my own. And I think that really, more than anything, probably got me interested in making games.
Well, that's pretty cool. So now your experience was with using various editions of Dungeons and Dragons. Now, what is your go-to RPG system, sorry, these days, and why?
Well, so I'm a big fan of the Rules Cyclopedia, but I'm also a big fan of original Dungeons and Dragons, like the 74 edition, right? So, but the reason that I got into that recently was because I wanted to learn more about the history of D&D and how all of those early TSR versions were sort of hacks of that version, right? Because that's very interesting to me from a game design standpoint. But I still use it in my games as the core of my games, mostly because I really like to I like my games to be improvisational, and the people who tend to play with me also like to be improvisational. So we find that having the lighter core rule set to expand on allows us to go in directions that we just couldn't if we were going to play it as a system, like you might play basic D&D or RC or even first edition as a system. Some people do that.
Well, you're basically like many old schoolers. It's rulings, not rules. You need a strong GM for that, but if you can pull it off, it is an awesome way to play because it's very freeing.
Well, there's, I mean, like, you think about what you did when you were a kid and you grabbed a couple of things, like, you said, well, this one's going to be the king and that one's going to be the queen and they're going to go live in this castle. Okay, that's pretty basic make-believe stuff. And the only difference between that and today is now you've just used reason and you have more rules. You're an adult now.
There you go. By the way, Glenn Hallstrom, Old Man Grognard, he's gonna love hearing that you have a fondness for the Rules Cyclopedia. That's probably his go-to book if he could ever make people play D&D, that would be the rule set that he would choose every time.
Oh, his podcast is just so brilliant and entertaining, and his reviews of the Rule Cyclopedia were like, you can really tell that that's his favorite right there. You know that,
Yeah,
and he was really into Osric too. He was really about Osric too.
and he's been a great what's the word I'm looking for? Not so much a diplomat, but he's been out there singing. He's kind of like proselytizing for Swords and Wizardry these days, and Swords and Wizardry Light, and he's done a very good job about that. He really it simplifies the gameplay. As I get older, I want less rules. I want more freedom when I run because uh, God knows I can't learn new rule systems anymore. I couldn't learn new languages in school. God knows how I learned all these game systems when I was younger, but I can't do it now. So the old school is easiest for me. And the Rule Encyclopedia is a nicely put together book. I stole stuff from that when I was running AD&D 2E.
I think what I like about it, and it's probably one of those books that I've spent more time with than the others because it's like it is classic era D&D, but it is the culmination of that era. So you
Yeah.
take it and it's like that's it. That's all you ever need, really. So like I might start with OD&D if we're doing a game like the Aegis Lands or something that's very improv heavy. But I will often even go into my first edition manuals or my RC or anything I have, really. I mean, it doesn't even have to be D&D. Sometimes I steal things. I steal math from other games when I like the math.
Hey.
I'm not really picky, so it's like to me, like I use core OD&D as a kind of base rule set. So there's the basics, all your stats and stuff, and it looks like D&D. We don't do really. I'll wait till you ask the racist class question.
Well, the racist class comes up as the next question. So there, racist class, yay or nay?
Racist class. So what is race and what is class, right? So I think that I really like racist class only because I like it as an archetype. I'm into archetypes. So I think that it's okay to have a racial archetype that also has specific things that it can do. And if you're going to do that, you may as well just drop the idea that it's a race from a game perspective and simply call it a class.
Okay.
So a lot of the classes that we play, like you'll be if you're in one of my games, it is definitely racist class, but we don't call it racist class. We just, if you want to be a certain race, it's a possibility, and we just have to determine what the stats for that particular race are. And it's largely cosmetic in my games because a lot of the people that play in my games, they really want to be really fantastic types of creatures, but it doesn't. I'm really just repeating actually a large portion of what's already written in the Rule Cyclopedia. Like if you think about it, I mean, this is like a lot of the basis of what they tell you in the Rule Cyclopedia, right? That you can just kind of like, I mean, you can even play a dragon in the Rule Cyclopedia as long as you're willing to do the scaling.
True. Very true. See, that's one of the reasons why, like, I like Axe, the Adventurer Conqueror King system. It plays very much like basic expert because it kind of builds off Labyrinth Lord, but it has racial classes, but they don't like the Dwarven fighter class, which I don't remember what it is offhand, but it is a dwarf fighter, but it doesn't look like just like a regular fighter with dwarfs, finding, sloping passages tacked onto it. It's a unique class to dwarves, and that to me is my like perfect compromise between the two. It's make classes that are racial but aren't just a mirror of the human class with like elves moving silently and +1 with bows and arrows.
Well, I think like one of the things I really like about the Rule Cyclopedia is the Mystara setting, and I know that Pex really likes it too. And
yeah, Pex is a huge fan.
And and the thing about Mystara is like if you go to what's the name of the website? What's it called? Vultipandius. If you go to Vultipandius and you look around, you just dig around, even if you just dig around with Google, what you'll find is that there's a whole ton of just racial / class things that you can steal that you can use. I mean, there's all kinds of things that you can borrow from there that are really good archetypes already. And some of the times people have asked me to do certain archetypes, and I've been like, I don't know, and I'll go look over there, and sure as sure as something, there'll definitely be somebody's already done it.
If you haven't listened enough, I curse like a New York City police officer, so you can say sure as shit. That's fine. You can't say it around Glenn. Glenn will on Glenn's podcast. He'll clean you up. I won't. So
Aren't you a New York City police officer?
I'm retired, but I still talk like one. So
well, that's good to know. Then I won't hold back.
Don't hold back. Yeah, when my son was younger, around I don't know 8 or 9, and he dropped the F-bomb, and I looked at him. I'm like, dude, what are you gonna do when somebody asks you where you learned that? He goes, well, if it comes to the words, I'll say mommy, but if it comes to how to use them, I'll tell him my dad, because nobody curses like you. And I was like, okay, I'm not sure if that's good or bad, but all right, I'll take it.
Hey, it's something.
Yeah. So, where do you stand on Save or Die? Not the podcast, which is a good podcast, but the actual concept of Save or Die as a mechanic in your gaming.
In my gaming?
Well, as a DM, how do you or as a player? Players don't like it, period. But as a DM, how do you feel about the Save or Die mechanic?
Well, honestly, like most of my players, I think, unless they've been, really working at a character for a long time, right? If they're early on, sometimes they even welcome me killing them, right? Because they get to start over. But I can see, like, if you've been working at something for a long time, to simply fail a save or die would be devastating to you if you're a role player. But I think also on the flip side of that is, what is real life like? I mean, anybody could a crane could drop on your head at any moment and you'd be dead. That's a save or die. So so if you didn't miss if you were unlucky and you didn't miss the crane, now you don't exist anymore. But the thing is like it's like any other character death, right? Was it a good death? Was it a spectacular death? Was it a heroic death? Was it a tragic death?
Or was it amusing? If it doesn't, you're right in that level. If it is heroic, if it's tragic, if it's amusing, if it's something that the group as a whole will remember, it's one of those, I guess, timestamps on your campaign. I guess maybe it works. If it's a forgettable death that is anticlimactic and not even tragic or humorous, then I don't know. I think something like that should at least be something that's memorable.
I generally try not to put my players into situations where they could just immediately die, but it does happen. And I am a big fan of using the dice as an oracle and seeing what the dice tell me about the situation, because I don't always know. I mean, we do a lot of improv, so I don't actually always know what's going to happen. People think that I plan things. I plan absolutely nothing. So we make decisions as I go. I choose rules as I think it fits the thing, and if I do a ruling one way, I make a note of it that I did it that way.
I like improvisational DMing with an outline. Like I had it one time with my gaming group. I didn't know I was going to be running the game. Get there, we have no DM. I'm running the game, and I have the deck of encounters from Inkwell Design.
Oh, I love that thing.
And I just shuffled the cards up and pop. I pulled out a card. It had a little cave complex, looked like maybe an old temple in it. And I didn't even want to see what the details were. I just wanted to see the map. And I told everybody, I go, give me 5 minutes. And I brainstormed something real quick. And we had a full session, 3.5 hours of what I was able to put together in those 5 minutes based upon that one thing. And then, of course, when the players start thinking that, well, maybe this is really important, and you start going, all right, well, maybe I can change that and make that what they think is important really important. Play into it. Sometimes you need to follow your player's lead. At least that's how I see it.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%, because really, like in my games, I tell the players up front, look, this is a sandbox game, and I'm relying on you to make the game as much as I'm making the game. It's not up to me to this is your game. It's not really my game, right? as far as I'm concerned, the players have more of a say of what we do than I do, and I'm just there to make sure that things kind of go the way they should from a rulings perspective, so that they're consistent. But a lot of the time, the players will say things. I mean, they know, like, they know what they're doing. But they'll say things because they want to see something happen in the game, but they're not really sure what it would look like. So I pick up on it, I make a little note, and I come back. I'm telling my players secrets right now, but that's all right. I come back and I'll be like, that was a really great idea. I'm going to turn that into a monster, but I'm going to surprise them by changing it this way just a little bit, so they'll be a little surprised by it. And I think that's a good way to play, because I mean, really, what are you doing? You're trying to have a conversation with your players in a way that's where there's risk and reward, but also that they're fully engaged in what's happening. They're not, I mean, sure, I could sit down. I like modules. Don't get me wrong. I love modules. Like, sometimes I like to do one shots where we just play through an old school module just because they're fun.
Right.
But it's like, I feel like sometimes there's not enough of that kind of, just going for it, storytelling kind of stuff happening. So I like to do that for my games.
Well, we're going to go back to that sandbox stuff after the last question, because I got a follow up I want to ask you about that. But let's move on to the last of the scripted questions. What would the teenage you think? The teenage you that came in with Ruth's Cyclopedia and Second Edition and such. What would that teenage you think of if they could see where you would be in the hobby today, at this point in your life?
I think that I think that teenage me would probably be like, why weren't you more involved with this before? Like, why were you like so focused on money and success, you weirdo? But the other part of me is like, oh, hey, you're here now and you're doing things, so that's good. Finally you're getting to enjoy your hobbies and like do your life the way you thought it should be. I don't know, maybe that's a weird answer, but it's mine.
No, it's listen, that. Well, my son's 25 now, and he asked me, I don't know, 6 months ago, I'm 25. I should be able to achieve my dreams. And I'm like, dude, I was 50 when I achieved mine. I retired and was able to get involved in gaming full time. When the time is right, you find your spot. It's good. And that's not a bad answer. That's a great answer. Because if you're doing what you love doing, what more do you need?
Well, and in fairness, before I came back to being a hobbyist and even working on video games and things, I was doing things that I was enjoying. I feel like I could have been doing other stuff and was probably overdoing it.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so I want to follow up on your sandbox comment, because
Okay.
I think you nailed sandboxes almost to a T. Because I've seen people, including myself, try to run sandboxes where you spend all that time setting up the little clues and the little places people can go and give them free reign. But my experience is, no matter what kind of free reign you give your players, they always find a direction that you never thought of, and all of a sudden you're sitting there with your pants down at the table going, what the fuck do I do now? I'm good at improv, don't get me wrong, and I enjoy it. But running a sandbox, like you said, is getting feedback from your players, and that's a skill. Now, how long have you been running like sandboxes for?
Well, so the thing is, like, I came back to tabletop gaming only like maybe 2 years ago, and I found the 5th edition people and I played some of that, and I found the OSR, and I came back and started playing the old stuff that I liked. And I found that there was a lot of games that people were just, they wanted to play modules, or they wanted to play by the rules a certain way because they wanted a certain flavor from a period, or the way people are, right?
Right.
And but I was like, but man, I kind of feel like those games that I used to play with, especially the 2nd edition games, had a lot more like interaction between the players and dialogue. And like when I used to DM as when I was in like high school,
Mm-hmm.
I would read the material. Everybody kind of knew what the rules were, and we would sit down, we'd have our characters, and we'd start going. But do you think any of us actually stuck to the damn story? No, never stuck to the story. It was always more fun to just make crap up, right? So it's like at some point you got to think, well, all your best laid plans are just going to be laid to waste by your players anyway, because what they're seeking is to like tell their story. So I kind of feel like I'm not saying don't plan anything. I'm saying plan a little bit, but then allow your players to tell you where the story goes because they have ideas about it. Like I had this one player, it was a 5th edition player. It was when it first came back, I started DMing for some college students because they needed a DM. And one of them decided that their character, their background was they were a rich kid. I said, okay, that's interesting. I wrote that down. Then they decided to talk about their father in character, so I wrote that down. And the next time we came back, I handed him this envelope, and it was sealed, and it had the seal on the front of it. And I said, "That's your family's crest." And he was like, "What?" And he opens it up, and he opens up this envelope, and it's a letter from his father on like letterhead with everything, and it's an urgent letter for him to come back to help his family during a time of crisis. And the whole party dumped everything they were doing and decided to go help the father. But that was on the player. He made all that up. I had nothing to do with that. He decided that that guy was his father. I didn't.
Yeah, but you picked up on it and you turned that into gaming goodness, and that takes skill. You can. Some people are good at it naturally. Other people have to learn it. I think anybody can learn it, but you have to be an observant person to pick up on that, and you did. And that, I know Hobbs has a great podcast when it comes to doing hex crawls and stuff. But some of the basics like this is really important, in my opinion. Picking up on the clues that your players give you, and they might not even realize necessarily the clues that they are giving you, which makes it even more fun when you give it back to them because they don't always know why they're biting at the hook as well as they are because you listened. And that to me is awesome.
Well, I mean, in his case, he was just he was a little more of an advanced role player, I think, because he just immediately the first game jumped in. It was very much part of his character, and so it made it a little easy for me to pick up on it. But I think that people have ideas, and like you can like sometimes I'll have the players give me like a background, but very short because if you don't tell them, look, give me 2 paragraphs, right? They'll give you pages because some of them are writers.
Yep. You'll either get 2 sentences or at least 2 pages. Yes, I've
Right.
learned that.
And it doesn't matter how much there is really in the end because what I do is I'll take it and I'll store it somewhere in a private DM channel that they can't see. And then I'll just pick at it and I'll be like, your aunt over here in where was that again? Oh, okay. New city exists. We'll put that down on the map.
Right.
Your aunt over there in Thorium or whatever it is having a problem, and needs your help. What do you think? And I'll just pick things from their character background and weave it in there so that they're part of the environment.
That's pretty damn cool, man. I've played in sandboxes that went nowhere because the players didn't know where they wanted to go, and the DM didn't pick up on clues that the players would give out. And it's kind of rough playing in a sandbox with, I don't want to say without options, but with too many options and really no bait in the water for anybody to really look at. And you picked up on the bait that your players wanted and needed, and that's great, man. Really.
I think a lot of what we're looking for in the OSR really is to be involved in games where we're really involved, where we can modify the environment based on our actions rather than it being like, well, if I kill this guy, then I get that thing, or maybe I don't kill that guy and then I'm dead and I just start over. Isn't very interesting.
No, that rinse and repeat gets old after a while.
Yeah. You can. I mean, don't get me wrong. It is fun to bash things over the head and to swing your axe at stuff or to pew pew it with fireballs. But like so like I like to use real actual like physics or realism in my games too, which usually throws people off because they'll fire off a fireball in a forest, and then suddenly the forest is on fire, and they're like, "What?" And you're like, "Well, it's fire." you know, I don't
Actions
know.
have consequences.
Yeah, you do stuff. I mean, the whole forest goes up. What do you want from me?
Yeah, I remember an issue of the Dragon back in, I don't know, somewhere numbered in the 60s or early 70s, where they had the volume of a fireball spell, and if it was cast in you cast it into a 10 by 10 room, like the blowback in a 10-foot wide corridor was like 180 feet or something like that. And I actually pulled it out as a consequence for my players back when I was in high school. Needless to say, they told me to never do that again, though, because we
Yeah, they
killed their
were
whole
more into
party.
the magical
They were
realism.
they were right. A fireball in a 10 by 10 room has no blowback because it's a magic fireball. It's like, yeah, all right, no, maybe we won't do that again. I never enjoyed TPKs, even when I was the one inflicting them. So yeah. So now you are involved in at least one project right now, correct?
Yeah, it's actually, well, I would say that I'm involved in technically two projects, because
Okay.
the first one is running the Mega Dungeon game server, which is primarily a play-by-post server. So, full disclosure, I mostly play play-by-post these days because it's easier to coordinate people for longer games. I know
Okay.
that sounds odd, but if you're in for it for the long haul, then it actually is a lot easier than trying to get people together. Uh, but yeah, so that's probably the primary thing that I do is the Mega Dungeon game server and running games there. And the other thing I started switching away from making tabletop games because, well, I have a good story there. I don't want to, just run my mouth.
No, go, please
Okay.
run your mouth.
All right. So let's go back to the games here for a minute because I kind of want to say something about it because I created an environment on the Mega Dungeon Discord. If you haven't been there, then come check us out. You can find a link to us on Ten Cars Tavern. And but mainly I started it because I felt like I wanted to have a place where people could come and host their games who weren't necessarily looking to become part of, to become Discord admins, right? Who just wanted a place to come and DM their games. Now, the other reason I started it was because at the time there were very few looking for group systems, and you had to be on all the different servers to get there. And I wanted to kind of consolidate the community in a way that we could find each other easily. I think that I've accomplished both of those goals, but I would say that I feel like the game hosting side of things has slowed down quite a bit.
Okay.
So it's mostly me running the Ageless Lands, which is my sandbox game. Um, so I might change the way that we run the server there soon, and I might focus more on the Ageless Lands. But that kind of leads me into what I was saying about video games. I actually, I was spending a lot of time doing game creation just like with paper and pencil in OneNote. I switched to OneNote at one point, and then I had spent all this time like building tools for myself to make my life easy, and then realized that I could just be making video games and that there were lots of tools to make my life easy.
Okay.
So I kind of switched to using Unreal Engine as like a really fancy OneNote in a way that you
Well,
can still play.
that's pretty damn cool.
And that kind of led me into, wanting to focus full time on making video games. It's not that I don't want to make tabletop games. It's just that I feel that I can bring some experience from the tabletop world to my video games, and I have the ability to be able to make those games. A lot of people would probably like the ability to make those games, but there's a lot to
Definitely.
know. Yeah, but I would like to say on that note that if you're thinking about making a video game and you think it's difficult, don't. It's a lot easier. It's never been easier than it has in the history of computing than right now to make a video game. And even if you think, the game I want to make is too complicated, you might actually be surprised that it's easier than it sounds. I know that sounds crazy because a lot of people have a lot of trouble with pipelines and stuff, But I think that if you stick to like a lot of the AAA tools and the stuff that the industry is using, then you don't have too many problems really. It's good stuff.
Well, it's kind of like RPGs 10 years ago with self-publishing. It was always hard to publish your own game until all of a sudden these tools came out where you could do your own layout and uh, put out your own PDFs, and places like DriveThru allow you to sell it, and it opens up self-publishing for so many people. Now, the proper tools can certainly help somebody who has, I'm not saying no knowledge, but minimal knowledge of computing to produce some game material, I guess.
Yeah, and you don't have to make complicated things. I decided that I'm actually a software engineer by trade, so most of my career is in software and information security. But I have a lot of experience with programming and with just dealing with computers in general. And so for me, it's like a natural thing to be able to sit down and like play around with a game engine and turn my ideas into something. And in some ways, it's actually easier because I kind of grew up doing a lot of modding and stuff. I mean, one of the things I spent a lot of time doing as a kid was modding the Neverwinter Nights engine with you remember the Aurora engine?
Oh God, yes. And
I used to love doing that.
I remember going on to servers.
Oh yeah, they were great. Did you ever play any of those old like really big Greyhawk modules? Those are really fun.
No, but I would tool around on some of well, I guess they weren't, and technically I guess it's not an MMO if you can only have like 6 people logged in at once, but I would wander around these virtual worlds that people had put together, and it was just it was a lot of fun, and you could see where the potential was and where this could go. And I wanted to, I never had the time to actually sit down and put anything together with something like that, but just being able to travel through somebody else's creation was a lot of fun, a lot of enjoyment.
Well, so I ended up using Unreal Engine just because I decided that I kind of wanted to go a direction of learning what like companies like Nintendo were moving towards, right? But there are other engines like Unity, and I was using Unity for a while, and I realized that one of the nice things about using Unity is it's almost exactly like that original Aurora engine. It's like a really beefy version of that, in a way.
Interesting. Now, is there any way? Now, have you completed any of these games?
Yeah, well, so that's where we're getting at.
Well,
So I had gotten to a point where I was taking a lot of notes on some different games I was looking to just kind of run down as far as tabletop games, and then I started to realize that I kind of had some themes that overlapped, and I started making a single video game based on those themes. And now I'm at the point where I taught myself on Real Engine because I didn't really know that much about it, and so I had to teach myself that first. And I got to the point where I was able to get my core gameplay for the game I want to make solidified as far as prototyping. And now I'm learning Maya and for 3D modeling, and trying to understand the pipeline there and get my characters and my assets going. And so I actually have an interesting story. I sort of like didn't really know what I was doing with the landscaping tools in Unreal, and I sort of made a landscape mesh that was way too big. And that led me into learning about the open world tools in that engine. And wow, so now I am like I'm basically dedicated to understanding how to make big open world games in that engine, just because the features are so cool. So my first game is going to be very so if you like cartoons, or if you like anime, or you like anything animated like that, this is very brightly colored.
okay.
Yeah. I'm going for, in this particular game, I decided to just go for it and go for like a pure fantasy style. So there's no, anything goes, right? So you could walk into any kind of mad situation that you could conceive of. I'm trying to make a really kind of almost psychedelic video game, right? But there's a lot of like, there's a lot of hurdles because I don't really know how to do this stuff quite yet. I mean, I know some stuff, and obviously I have software experience, but I'm also teaching myself all these tools, right? So,
Right.
but I figure I'm doing so good that and I have the concept for where I'm headed. I'm starting to do like my actual real level design now, and that might change the core gameplay slightly, but probably not too much. And so I'm looking at hopefully by the end of the year to have this game done, which is it seems crazy because I'm doing it by myself, right? But it's all I do all day, so.
That, hey, that works. Is this going to be Kickstarted or something that's going to be available on one of the game sites that you can download from, like Steam?
Yeah, so I've thought about a lot about this, and some other people have asked me if I can do like Steam Early Access and that kind of thing, and if I'm going to do Kickstarter. And um, I'm I'm not against all of those things, but I feel like Kickstarter or even Steam Early Access or programs like that, I think that goes better when you are nearer to completion and you're only asking for people to back stretch goals. Because I notice a lot of people will. This is just an observation, but will get involved in a Kickstarter, and then but they haven't really worked on the project, and they really need the money to bootstrap the project, and so then they end up working in a manner that's not necessarily healthy.
Right. And then 7 years later, you still don't have a completed project. Far West.
Right.
So, no, that is, and I think that applies to whether you are doing a pen and paper game, board game, computer game. Be 90 to 95% complete before you start uh, looking for uh, people to support you. You have to show that you can complete this, and to do that, it has to be more than a concept. It has to be uh, almost ready, like you said, stretch goals. The core product is done. I'd like to get more out there. I'd like it to be bigger and better. So these are the stretch goals so we can add on. I think that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, and I think that mostly what people want is to be involved in it. So it's not, they know they're not making the game, right? But they want to have been there and been part of the Kickstarter and been early access and all that stuff because it's a social thing, right?
Yeah.
So you want to give people the opportunity to be part of that, and I mean I enjoy that, right? So but my thoughts on like Steam Early Access, for example, same thing. I wouldn't put anything up there that actually probably what I would do is I might at later stages after there's already been kind of some QA, I might open up Steam Early Access for a beta and allow people to QA.
That's not bad. That really isn't a bad way to do it at all.
Well, I mean, then that way you get the people who are actually interested in playing your game are going to give you the right feedback, right? So
Right. And they'll know it's not complete because I've been involved in beta tests back when I was a more active computer gamer, and I used to hate reading feedback like, "Oh, this game doesn't feel complete." It's a beta test, dude. That's why it gets wiped every week or two, and becomes your characters start afresh. It's called beta testing, and you got to make sure people understand what beta testing is. That's a whole other topic of conversation. I think some people don't
yeah,
understand it.
I had some good beta test experiences in the past, like what was it? The Warcraft MMO, I think it was. And
Okay.
the things that I like about good beta tests is when the developers put the testing, debugging, and reporting tools in your face.
Right. So you can't miss it. This is why you are here. Please submit your issues, you know your feedback.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
make it accessible, and then so one of the things that I'm thinking about is going a kind of like instrumentation route. So I would instrument the games, and then I would release them, and then you would have an obvious way to send me feedback, but you would also be included as part of passive data collection. So like any errors that came across like in a code path or whatever would get sent to a server. You know, it's less work for you.
Oh yeah. That sounds like a good way to handle it. So you sound like you have a busy year ahead of you.
I do, and it's difficult because I'm like one of those people who works really very hard, and it's hard for me because it's getting harder to do that as time goes on. But yeah, I'm kind of dedicated to making this game because I feel like if I can, I feel like I made a happy accident in maybe making the game map almost too big because now I have too much space to fill and too much story to make. But in another way, it's like I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, and I wanted to be part of this creative process and using these tools and getting to a good result, because I want to learn how to use those tools so that I can use them to make all kinds of other things. So having a good first project that's big and difficult seems like less of a challenge to me and more of like something I should be doing if I really am serious about getting to where I want to be, right?
Well, yeah, I guess it kind of clears out the problems up front, and that way you don't have them later on.
Yeah, it's exactly it. There's so much complexity that like you have to touch every part of the tools that you're using in order to get to the end, right? So even the things that you think like, oh, I'll never use that, you're going to use it.
Nice. All right. Well, I think we have come to the end. That was good though, because I'll be honest with you, I'd love to play a computer game, an open world computer game that, honest to God, isn't Skyrim. So
Oh, yeah, and the thing is, like, I really liked the way that Breath of the Wild was done. And I feel like that it was done very well, but it had like too many like kind of meta games built into it for my taste. But I
okay,
like the openness of it, and I kind of like that it's massively single player, right? Um, because like there you see a lot of open worlds or MMOs a lot of the time, but I
yep,
mean, who's making MMOs anymore, really, right? Most people are going to consoles. The few people that are making MMOs, I don't know. Most people are still playing old Korean MMOs, right?
yeah,
You see something like Breath of the Wild comes along, and you think, I could do that. I could do something like that. Like, to me, it's like it's more about world building, right? So like, I want to go and I want to tell weird, wacky, crazy stories with crazy characters. I want it doesn't have to make any sense. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be like crazy D&D, right?
right.
That's what I want to make.
Well, it sounds like you have it well in hand. Excellent. Well, Elfstar, Claire, thank you for joining me today. Uh,
Thank you for having me.
I hope the audience, just like me, looks forward to the completion of this single player MMO or open world. I am looking forward to that because I'm finally trying to put some time away to play. Well, time to decide to play video games or computer games again for 2019, and that's something I could look forward to maybe at the end of the year or 2020. So that's fun. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Hopefully I'll get it done in time.
If you want to find out more of what's going on with Elfstar, uh, Mega Dungeon Games has a chat channel or a channel in the Designers and Makers on the Tenkar's Tavern Discord server, and they have their own Discord server at Mega Dungeon Games. And there'll be if you go to Tenkar's Tavern server, if you're on it, there's a link in the Mega Dungeon Games channel for you. So, again, thank you. Thank you to everybody who is listening live and those that'll be listening later on. As always, God bless, stay safe, be well, and I will talk with you all tomorrow. Later, folks.